Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today with the Clinician Engineer Hub, our initiative that aims to bridge the gap between medicine and engineering. And it's an honor to have consultant urologist surgeon here, Mo Belal, based at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham. Now, unfortunately, Mo suffered quite a tragic incident while cycling, and he had to experience months of rehabilitation in order for him to return to work as a surgeon. What's particularly interesting of his journey is the interplay between himself as a surgeon and engineers, where engineers worked alongside him to develop a specific chair, allowing him to return to theatre and continue operating as a surgeon. I will allow Mo to introduce himself, and really it's an honor to have you here today. I think it's a very exciting journey that you've had, obviously troubled with a lot of grief and sort of disadvantage. However, I think this interplay between surgery and engineering is something that we should all learn from. And so, Mo, over to yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm just going to share I'm just going to share a quick slide presentation, just to sort of give a brief overview of the background. So let me just do that again. Sorry.
Perfect. Can see your slides. Oh, I think
Oh,
they
you could see the slides. Oh, so all right,
could
perfect.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see now. Gift of
Okay.
others.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. It's interesting. I'm just going to sort of give a background. Actually, when I used to give this talk, I used to call it overcoming adversity, but actually adversity is a gift, and that's the way I see it. And so, uh, over 4 years ago, I was out cycling with a friend, and that's me, out cycling with a friend in the countryside near Birmingham. It was during the COVID period, when you weren't allowed to go outside apart unless it was during COVID. That's me. That's my friend. It was an unwindy day. Wasn't a wet day. We'd probably done about 40, yeah, 30 plus miles. We're on the way back home. And so with cycling, some of you may realize, you take it in turns. The person in front normally takes the wind resistance, that makes it easier for the person behind. And so it was my turn to go forward. And so um, I still very distinctly remember we were going quite fast. I was going about 40 kilometers an hour, and I remember out of nowhere this tree falling. I remember my friend shouting "tree." I remember the time thinking this is going to hurt. And so the next thing I remember is waking up dreaming, and I said, "Why am I dreaming?" The last thing I remember was the tree, and so I then regained consciousness. As soon as I tried to get up, it's when I realized I was paralyzed. And the weirdest thing happened was that I had this visualization of myself in a wheelchair, and then the second thought was it was going to be a long journey. Um, and before you know it, it's a bit like when you stub your toe. There's a half a second delay before the pain kicks in. As you can imagine, it was the worst imaginable pain. So that was the tree. The tree hit me at the exact moment I cycled by, and so it caused a very significant injury. I was very lucky the ambulance arrived not too far after. And it's funny the things you remember, and I sort of distinctly remember the ambulance guy coming saying, "Look, I've got you some paracetamol." And I remember the time thinking, really don't think so. And so I remember remonstrating with him and saying, "Look, I need something stronger than paracetamol." And he was very insistent on the paracetamol, but I think in the end I persuaded him to get the specialist. And not surprisingly, I broke my spine, I broke my ribs, I had blood in my lungs as well as it's called hemopneumothorax. And this was my bike. I was very lucky. I had a carbon wheel which crushed, and that meant that the momentum meant that I wasn't trapped under the tree. For those of you who are cyclists out there, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. So this is my farewell cycle ride. Um, for those of you non-cyclists, things to look at would be the average speed and the average power. Those tend to be the most important things. And that was a tree. And so that night, I ended up having emergency surgery that night. And the first part of the interaction is I had these metal bars put into my spine. And so it's very difficult. Having been, I am a surgeon. My area is neurology, which makes it confusing. Anything that affects the neurological tract affects the bladder, and I'm the specialist of that in the West Midlands. And so you think you've got a spinal injury. The thing I do recall is you lose all sense of control of your own temperature regulation. And as you can imagine, the pain, it was horrendous. And so what they do is they turn you every 4 hours on your broken ribs, off your broken ribs, until it sort of reaches a sort of crescendo of pain. And so I ended up having a intravenous ketamine infusion, which is one hell of a drug. Gives you the most psychedelic hallucinations. As always, as a medic, you're always fortunate to know people, and I was fortunate enough to be transferred to the London Spinal Unit. So this is a picture of me about day 10, and it's amazing. You go through this catabolic state, you lose so much weight. So I was probably about 80 kilos prior to the accident, and I was probably down to 65. And so, I lost 15 kilos of muscle, and you go through this enormous catabolic state. So the only thing really, if there's anything to really take away from the talk is this particular slide about spinal cord injury. And so when you see someone in a wheelchair, actually the inability to walk is the least of the problems, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. And if you ask most spinal cord injury patients, initially they all want to walk, but after a couple of years, all they want is normal bladder bowel function, not to have the constant nerve pain or be worried about pressure sores, um, and all the spasms and not being able to control your temperature. So I was fortunate to go for rehab, and rehab, the way to describe rehab is sort of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And so for most people, if I was to ask them to jump a meter, they jump a meter. But if I'd ask them to jump a meter in a high-rise building, they had to have that fear, the fear of falling. Still only a meter. And that's the fear I had of not in control of my body. And so my accident happened in the COVID times where you weren't really allowed visitors, which made it a bit more challenging. You were in a bay of four, and so you go from this massive transformation, not being control of half your body, having bed baths for weeks and doing your bladder bowel management on the bed itself, and so it's a dramatic change. Nevertheless, I pushed on through, and hadn't seen my children since the accident, so they were very keen to get me home. I made a lot of impact, progress forward. Prior to letting me go, they did a further follow-up scan, and I knew then I needed further surgery. The spine was still broken. And so I ended up having to go through another 12-hour surgery with three surgeons using the bone grafts and cages inside my spine in order to fix that. So it was a bit difficult having climbed the first mountain, having to then reset and climb the second mountain, go back to square one, which was flat bed rests. And as a medic, if you're a healthcare professional, you've been guaranteed you'll have complications. So this is me after the operation, and so this is my TSLO brace, which they obviously bespoke made for you. Um, and so that keeps your spine fixed. And so I was desperate to make sure the second operation worked. As a surgeon, your first operation is your best operation, and redo spinal surgery is fraught with difficulty. The next aspect of the journey was coming home, and I think the NHS is fantastic as an inpatient, but in terms of community, it's a lot more challenging. There's very limited rehabilitation support. I'd already decided that I was going to try and come back to work, or at least try. And I realized I had to do a series of things, including weaning off the neuroleptics, such as gabapentin, tramadol, and also learning to drive again with a hand control car. I also realized that, look, I'm in control of my destiny. I kind of broke the journey down into three aspects. One's the physical, one's the mental, one's the spiritual. But it's also about finding the right team as well to help you. So I created my own rehab routine, which I still do. And the rehab routine, I was very fortunate to be able to purchase electrical stimulator to keep my muscles alive, and I still do an hour of that, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, and that's to maintain the muscle. And the reason you maintain the muscle is otherwise you've just got skin and bone, and you can get pressure sores, which are very extremely challenging to deal with. Standing to maintain your bone density, and I had a standing frame, a motorized standing frame, and also an electrical motor med bike to move the legs to keep the circulation going. Um, Later on, I was very fortunate enough to have access to inpatient rehab. So the muscle stimulation, which I still have and which I'll still use, is fantastic. It's a bit like being electrocuted, but there's so much stuff about electrical stimulation that can help with your recovery. My lifetime ambition, I got myself a beard like Father Christmas, which was much to the disappointment of my wife and children. It took a year for the spine to heal. I had initially set myself that goal of a year, but it was unlikely for that to happen. And so I learned the first of many lessons, which was about resetting your goals and say, look, it's okay. There's no way I can come back. At that moment, when they took the brace off, which I had for 8 months, I couldn't even sit up. I'd lost, all strength. And so that's when I went into my intensive rehabilitation. The intensive rehabilitation was 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And the thing about neurorehabilitation, it's not about doing it once, it's about doing it, 1,000 times. So I was very fortunate whilst I was an inpatient at the private rehabilitation place. We then, with the help of the engineers, tried out all the different equipment that would be suitable. And so we went through exoskeletons, we went through different sorts of solutions to try and help me come back. I mean, the other side of it was you also need the support of uh, your trust. You also need the support of your colleagues. And so one of the things was this is bespoke standing electric wheelchair. We did a simulation day where with the team how I would scrub, how I would operate, and that gave me the confidence that I could come back. And so indeed, I came back over 2 years ago. That's me in outpatients. That's me after the operation I did, which is called an artificial uni sphincter, which ironically was created by a clinical engineer, which is a fantastic bit of kit. Um, and um, and so the journey continues. And so new chapters open and close. I'm now the vice president for education for BAUS, won the medal from the Royal College of Surgeons. I'm the SI ambassador. I'm also the Horatio Gardens trustee, which create gardens in spinal injury units. So this is some of the technology that actually made a huge difference. And so, was constantly, trying different things. I tried the G suit, the stimulated rise I still got, which actually proves to be very helpful. The orthotics, I was very fortunate enough to go to London Orthotics, and I have a Hytronic um, CAFO, which is shown in the first picture over there. There's the Indigo. Unfortunately, the Indigo is no longer CE marked, and I tried a different one, and there's another exoskeleton called the Cyberdyne, which I'm going to try. And part of the exoskeletons is there's a sort of carryover in terms of rerouting so once you do these exoskeletons, what tends to happen is that there's some carry on from once you stop taking the exoskeletons as well. So there's so much neuroplasticity we don't know about. Certainly the smart drive which I have is immensely helpful, and I have a trial ride, and I'm about to hopefully at some point get an Omeo, which is like a segue to wheelchair where you use your core. And so technology is inherent within spinal injury, and it's trying to find the different solutions to try and get you better. So certainly coming back, different priorities. I learned a lot of professional lessons, the importance about leading by example, and about communication is key in building the right team around you. From a personal level, I learned a lot about gratitude, being grateful for what you do have and what you don't have. I'm grateful I've got my hands, my brain, an amazing family, amazing friends. What is there not to be grateful for? I also learned that we've all been given a chance, of whatever happens, how we look at it in a positive way or a negative way, and whatever happens, you're able to frame that in a positive way. Of course, feelings will come and go, and my sort of philosophy was, if I was upset one day, that was fine, but tomorrow was always going to be a new goal. And also about how to, accept and embrace uncertainty, and also come to terms with pain. And I still have this constant neuropathic pain down my leg, and the only way to describe it is that someone's got a red hot sword chopping your legs. um, but the way I look at it is like a purification of my soul, so I don't see it as a negative. So, on a practical level, if you've got friends or colleagues going through a difficult time, simple acts of kindness mean the world. Whether it's a text message, a phone call, it means so much to people during that time. One of the things I really learnt also was about hope. Hope isn't denial, and I think healthcare professionals can crush patients' hope. And I found that hope was really important to allow me to push things forward. And so there's an experiment done on rats, unfortunately, where they put the rats in water and watched them, and after about 15 minutes they gave up and drowned. They repeated the experiment, and at 30 minutes they took the rats out, rested for 2 minutes, and the rats and put them back in. The rats didn't swim for minutes; they swam for hours, because they had this the hope of being saved. And that's what hope can do. And I think it's really important that we don't crush people's hope. And as human beings, we're inherently positive individuals, and so it's really important when we deal with people, that we keep positive in our interactions. And so coming back really is, the kind of the things I realize is that the importance about being in the service of others. That all the healthcare professionals, clinical engineers, you can have a massive life-changing impact on people. And I think it's also important that we are kind and compassionate to each other as well. And sometimes, in healthcare, we can be dispassionate towards our colleagues, especially if they're going through a difficult time, or going through illness. So final thought is really, if I could go back, I would not change it for the world. I've grown so much through that adversity, that those are the lessons I could not have learned. And there's always brighter days ahead, and it's really important, not to give up hope. Okay, thank you. I'll go. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much for going through that. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do by any means, and I recognize that you've suffered a lot, and you've gone through a lot in terms of your journey. What I think's really incredible is what was driving you to get to the point of even considering returning to work. Because I think I look at it that certainly the rehabilitation and that process, that battle in itself is very, very difficult. And you then decided you're going to win that battle, which you did, and also return to work, which I think is really impressive.
Yeah, no, I think it gives you time to reflect, and you realize what are the important things. And I think sometimes you can all become jaded by working, in certain healthcare situations, because the systems are the problems that cause the frustration, the difficulty. And then if you've been long enough, then you can become jaded by what you do, or lose that sort of passion. And so for me, it was actually, I realized, you look at, you take a hard look at yourself and say, oh, what have I done in my life? And actually, you look back and you say, look, I've actually been in the service of others, and it's an incredible thing to try your best. And it was extremely humbling that I received letters of support from my patients as well as my friends and colleagues. And it made me realize that, look, whatever capacity I came back in, it'd be a positive, either to show other people that whatever happens, that you can overcome those, but also on a practical level, that I have a very unique insight. Having been, a surgeon, having gone through all that, and being a patient, that I can bring insights that can help healthcare professionals deal better with patients. And also from the patient's point of view, actually, they see people in wheelchairs providing care. And that one of the amazing things was my interactions with these patients who were in wheelchairs for 10 plus years, that I'd been spending time with. And now my interaction is different. It's a lot more meaningful. There's a lot of unsaid things. And so, they're now able to now I understand how difficult it is. And so that was the driver. And it was, I had a lot of patients waiting for my bespoke surgery. I felt that I couldn't let down, but also all these other things. And what I kind of did was, look, the end journey doesn't matter, like we focus on that destination. And I said to myself, it doesn't matter what happens if I come back or not come back. Actually, I'm going to enjoy the journey and give it my best. And I think it's when we put pressure on ourselves by saying, oh, we're definitely going to achieve X or we're definitely going to achieve Y. And what I kind of learned was it's a lot about managing our own expectation. Sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to achieve something by 3 months. But if you extend it to 5 months and you achieve it before 5 months, then you're happy. And so often we don't manage ourselves. And I think it was an opportunity for me to give me a drive and focus as well, because it's very easy. I think what I learned is that when I had my accident, one of the big things I hadn't realized was my identity of being a surgeon was actually a really important identity. I hadn't realized that's how I define myself. And that lack of purpose as well. It's very easy to sort of either go down the abyss or and I decided, look, listen, it doesn't really matter what happens. I'm going to give it my best and then see where that takes me.
No, it's really, really inspiring. And I think you definitely touch upon a lot of philosophical concepts and the spiritual side to guide you through. And yeah, I think, that theme that you mentioned, that having gone through this experience, being able to then reflect back and actually contribute to healthcare in a way that I guess most physicians and surgeons wouldn't be able to do, and so you're there constantly advancing healthcare through the lived experience. Another question, if I may, is around the sort of engineering platforms. So it's certainly a passion of mine. How did you manage to sort of galvanize the clinical engineering team within the NHS, and what was sort of the various processes or steps that, very briefly, that you had to undertake to get things done, and then as a final, what were the kind of limitations that you experienced in that process?
Yeah, it is. I think the process can be quite challenging, and so I had to access lots of different departments, whether it's orthotics, engineering, and so in a way, you had to create that sort of multidisciplinary thing. And so sometimes it's about encouraging people to say, because they have this fear of the unknown, no one's come back, or how we're going to do this. And actually, it's setting those limitations down. And so it did involve a lot of patience and time, and just keep on pushing. And so getting people on side and say, look, come on, we need to sort of go through that process to make sure we get through, and sort of it's that kind of leadership that we talked about, getting people on side to say, look, we can do something amazing here. And quite often, sadly, in the NHS, the answer is always no. But if you've got everyone at least saying, listen, we'll try our best, it actually makes a big difference. And so it's still a process, and still I'm still, I think I'm looking at whether the robotic program might extend my career. But the problem with the current robots are, for example, they require a foot pedal, except one of them. So the Cambridge Medical CMR doesn't. So in fact, the CMR, in fact, I was in fact talking about that actually. That was, so I'm going to try. It might even come down to Cambridge to try that.
Yes, you
And
must.
so I think the journey continues, and the beauty is, I think, engineers are problem solvers, and actually a bit like surgeons, actually we're problem solvers too as well. And so in a way, it's a natural marrying of things. Generally speaking, the clinical engineers are very keen to help, and they're very keen, to try and solve problems. Um, but I've had to sort of not just access the clinical engineers, I've had to access orthotists, and in orthotists, there's an increased use of technology as well, which has been really positive as well.
Fantastic. And yes, CMR, definitely. By all means, come over. We're more than happy to support you here. And thanks again for your time, because I appreciate how busy you are now. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to be uploading this on our YouTube channel, so I think it will spark a lot of discussion. And by all means, get in contact with Mr. Belal. Hopefully, are you on LinkedIn? I should have asked at the start, actually.
Yes, I am.
So yes,
I'm on LinkedIn.
a lot of opportunities here between Cambridge and Birmingham.
Okay, pleasure. Thank you
Thanks a
very
lot,
much.
Mr. Belal. Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.